Thank you very much. Good afternoon. So shortly after I turned 18, I received a letter requiring me to sign up for the Selective Service. This is a requirement for all men in the United States in case that a draft is needed. I refused. The year was 1982. I had neither the interest nor the inclination to serve in the military and fight in some war overseas. I informed my parents, somewhat smugly, about my decision. And this is what they said. You know, Sanjay, this is your decision, but we came to this country from Kenya and brought you and your sister with us because we thought that America would be the ideal place to raise our family. My dad in particular noted that he had lived in 4 different countries across 4 different continents and had never felt as free as he did in the United States, having been made unwelcome in other countries, either because of his race or his religion. And the source of that freedom, my parents told me, the men and women who were willing to sacrifice everything for this country, who were willing to serve in the armed forces and fight in some war overseas. Because of them, our family could immigrate and thrive. You know, I mulled this over, and not long after that discussion, I changed my mind and signed up. I realized my parents were right, and it's perhaps the only time I publicly admitted my parents were right about something. And while, of course, I was not drafted, there's been no draft in this country since the early 1970s, I haven't forgotten that conversation and the duty I felt for those who serve. It's one key reason I work for a mission-driven healthcare system like the VA. As you likely know, the VA has been in the news a lot. But some things that VA medical centers do, the special things, are rarely talked about. Here's one example of what makes the VA unique, and it occurs when a veteran dies in our hospital. I've been caring for veterans for over 2 decades at 4 different VA medical centers, as a medical student, resident, chief resident fellow, and now as an attending physician. And I want to share with you a VA ceremony that's both beautiful and heart-wrenching. It's known as the final salute, and it's done for veterans who die under our care. After pronouncing death, the patient's family is called and comes in to see their loved one. The body is placed on a gurney and draped with the American flag. As the body and family are led out of the hospital room to the exit, taps is played. It's the signal for the healthcare workers and especially their fellow soldiers to pay tribute. Civilians stand with their hands on their hearts. Veterans give the military salute standing if they're able. The nurse manager who introduced me to this ceremony described one such final salute in which an amputee struggled to stand on his remaining leg, but the veteran did with pride and resolve. For me as a civilian, I'm reminded of how lucky others and I are that we get to care for these men and women who all too often are forgotten and may be struggling mightily. Other mission-driven health systems have their own means of respecting patients. For instance, when I was a medical resident in San Francisco, I cared for patients with AIDS during their hospitalization at San Francisco General Hospital. As many of you know, San Francisco General is a mission-based hospital totally committed to the underserved. The care provided to patients on Ward 5B, as it was known at the time, served as a model for high-quality, compassionate care for those with AIDS, as the New York Times reported in 1985. Faith-based systems do the same. For example, the Catholic-based system, Ascension Health, refers to their 150-plus facilities as health ministries rather than hospitals, thereby emphasizing a holistic approach to patients that also focuses on their spiritual needs. But back to the VA. The VA remains the largest integrated healthcare system in the country, with about 160 hospitals and nearly 1,000 other facilities, such as outpatient clinics. 9 million veterans receive their health care at the VA every year. The VA is also the largest provider of health care training in the country. Nearly 2/3 of all doctors received some of their training at a VA hospital. As you also may know, the VA's nationwide electronic medical record system, first introduced in 1995, was a trailblazer and still considered a top system in the country, scoring higher than Epic, MedTech, or Cerner among users. A case in point. Several years ago, a veteran in the middle of a cross-country road trip was driving through Michigan when he began feeling sick, likely because he ran out of his medications. Within minutes of his arrival at our VA hospital, we were able to access his records from a VA medical center over 1,000 miles away, learn he had a history of Addison's disease, a rare disease caused by a hormone deficiency, and we were able to provide prompt treatment. It's no surprise then that studies consistently show that the VA does very well compared with non-VA care. For example, this study published a few months ago found that VA hospitals performed the same as or significantly better than non-VA hospitals on most safety, mortality, and effectiveness measures. The same study, however, also found high variation across VA facilities, which I'll return to in a moment. And while the VA is better than people likely think, it's far from perfect. Much work remains to be done to further improve the VA. Specifically, the system needs to improve access and timeliness of care. It needs to reduce the often challenging bureaucratic hurdles and pay much more attention to what frontline clinicians need to perform their duties well. Perhaps most importantly, the VA must figure out how to ensure that the large variability in quality of care across its 1,000 facilities improves. Many VA hospitals, perhaps most, provide terrific care. However, there are too many that provide inadequate care for various reasons. But despite its problems, the most remarkable aspect of VA hospitals is the patient population, the men and women who have sacrificed for this country. It was these men and women who bravely served this country and who kept it free and open to people like me and my family, immigrants looking for better lives. I didn't sit in the foxhole with them or parachute into jungles, but I still have a duty to provide America's veterans high-quality care delivered humanely. And I learned this from the other people I have seen working in VA hospitals. They have a special attitude toward their patients. It takes the form of respect, gratitude, of empathy, a level of caring that is nothing short of love. You can see it in the extra services provided for patients who are often alone in the world, too far from home to be visited. I once kept track of how many patients had family members with them at the university hospital compared to the VA when I made rounds in the morning. 70% of the university patients had a visitor sitting at bedside. At the VA, about 10%. In fact, it's common for nurses to take ownership of their patients and say, "our veteran," when discussing a patient's care with me. A while back, I cared for a veteran in his 50s, a house painter, whom we diagnosed with cancer that had metastasized widely. We offered him chemotherapy, which would have given him an extra few months, but he chose hospice. He told me he wanted to go home, be with his wife, and play the guitar. One of the songs he wanted to play was "Knocking on Heaven's Door." I was moved. I liked him, I admired him, and I was also disturbed I couldn't do more for him. My medical student felt the same way. Before the patient left, the student told me that the veteran shook his hand, looked him in the eye, and said, "Thanks for being a warrior for me." He's going home to die, and he's thanking us. That's the special kind of patient who shows up at a VA hospital. Every single one of them should have the special kind of care they deserve. And we must ensure that that care is superb from the moment they leave the service to the time of their final salute. Thank you very much.